Hi everybody, welcome back to John's Briefs here with attorney extraordinaire Tim Forshey of Forshey Law, the guy who did my NFA trust and has helped me in a lot of legal stuff and also runs an excellent online and hybrid CCW
course. We do in-person CCW. We also do an online course that's live action. So, and that's on azccwonline.com. So.
Check him out for
Thanks,
that.
Johnny.
Yeah, you bet. Today we're going to talk about, it was on the channel not too long ago, very interesting defensive gun use out of Houston. And the fact that the guy was a prohibited possessor makes this one really weird.
Yeah.
Firearms Legal Protection is who I trust to help me after a use of force incident. If you're a Firearms Legal Protection member, I will also be on your team as a consulting expert, and you can attend our monthly active self-protection training seminars for free. Check out all they offer to their members at the link below.
So the facts of the case, link is in the description. You can go watch it if you missed it. A couple that was on a visa that had set up a fake armed robbery at a gas station to try to get a non-immigrant visa that lets them stay in the US because they were the subject of violence or something. So a guy they know attacks them like he's robbing them. A guy sitting over kind of off the way sees it happen, pulls his gun and shoots that guy and kills him. And then walks up to the couple and says, hey, forget that I existed because he's a prohibited possessor.
Right.
And then eventually figured out the fact that, oh, this was caught on video. And so eventually turns himself in. And I have not seen anything beyond that as to whether he faced additional charges for that.
Okay.
But would we? You know what I mean? The district attorney made a statement to the newspaper, to the reporter, that no charges had been filed and an investigation is pending. So, but I mean, if he's a prohibited possessor, especially if he's on probation, his PO is the one who's going to go, yep, yoink, there went that.
Just because if he's on felony probation, then yeah, he's a prohibited possessor. So are we sure it was felony probation and not felony indictment for something else?
No, it was probation.
Okay, yeah, then he's a prohibited possessor.
Yeah, he's a prohibited possessor. And so you're like, okay, I'm a little torn on this one, Tim.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Well, I would like to know why he's a prohibited possessor. Because as you know, in the wake of Bruin, we're seeing a real sweeping movement across the country to allow non-violent felons, of course my definition of that might differ from yours, but to allow non-violent felons to get their gun rights back. We just saw a case out of all the courts, the Ninth Circuit. I don't know if you saw this last week, the Duarte case out of the Ninth Circuit. Where the court, for those of you who don't know, the Ninth Circuit is the hippie circuit. That's in San Francisco. That includes Arizona. They're our circuit, but they're notorious for the most liberal, poorly thought out decisions. They're by far the most overturned court in the land.
Giant circuit too. I mean, just way too big. It needs to be broken up three to three.
By geography, I think like close to 30% of the U.S. or something. It's huge. Anyway, but of all the places where you get a pro-gun decision out of the circuit court, we've got a couple with Judge Benitez, Jelly Bean Benitez out of San Diego. But at any rate, they ruled that it's unconstitutional under Bruin to take the Second Amendment rights away from somebody who's been convicted of a non-violent felony. Now, the Justice Department has already said they're going to appeal that to an en banc decision, which I would be surprised if doesn't get it turned around right there, because that's what's happened to Benitez decisions at least twice. But we already have one other circuit court where they made the same holding, and I think we have 3 circuit courts that have disagreed. So in theory, that should be going up to the Supremes, and we should hear how the Supremes sing that song. But despite the fact that that happened, that doesn't mean it's legal for non-violent felons to have guns yet. And I don't know what felony he was on probation for. Right. I don't know if it was violent or non-violent. So let's assume, for argument's sake, for the purpose of our discussion, that it was a violent felony. So we're not arguing about how he should have had his rights back. The issue is he likely to face prosecution on that issue? I would say yes. Yeah. I'd be pretty surprised. Yeah, because that's an open and shut slam dunk issue, regardless of whether he was, in theory, in the right for using lethal force, which we'll talk about in just a second, I'm sure. But the issue is, should he have even had a gun? And that's a pretty much slam dunk. The case, it's res ipsa loquitur. It's just going to be very easy to prove that one. So
we have you on video shooting a guy.
Yeah, exactly.
We have a dead guy.
And I will say this, as a firearms instructor, I'm sure you can echo this, he was hitting a sprinting target from, I would say, 20, 25 yards away. It looked like
darn fine marksmanship.
And you said it was a headshot. So
darn fine marksmanship.
Either really lucky or a really skilled shooter. Yeah, one or the other. So.
And it's one of those things. So, I mean, I think the use of deadly force is justified, given the fact that what he saw, how fast everything happened. Yeah. There's people like, well, he's running off. I think as he's pulling the gun, he's still right with them, and then it just takes him that little bit of time to aim and see.
My question would be, and we'll never know the answer, is the shooter, what did he believe he had just seen? If he saw a guy roughing up a couple, trying to get a purse, who was unsuccessful or even successful, and is now running away either without the purse or with the purse, but he had no reason to believe that anybody had been dangerously assaulted or beat up or shot or stabbed. Now, who is he shooting? He's shooting a guy, there's no longer any risk to a human life, and he's shooting somebody who had arguably had perpetrated a property-only crime.
So the interesting bit there...
So that could, I think you could argue that either way, sadly.
Yeah, and every state is a tiny bit different here. Most are pretty the same, except for, so they're in Houston, Texas.
Yeah.
In Texas, a robbery by definition is a theft of property involving any threat of use of force. And statutorily in Texas, you can stop a robbery with deadly force.
Okay.
So just a robbery, not an armed robbery like here.
Correct, yeah.
So here it had to be an aggravated robbery or an armed robbery.
So that would change the analysis. Yeah,
so, you know, again, probably, I think, you know, given where he is now, should we use deadly force to stop purely property crimes? Well, I think, you know, when you define it as I'm either using force or threatening force in order to take property, that's a little different story. But I think where the real then head scratcher, now this is where I guess me as a libertarian, I get in trouble, right? As trying to be a thoroughgoing libertarian. And I've always said, if I don't trust you with a gun, I shouldn't trust you in my community. And so, you know, hey, wait a minute. I don't care what your past is. Do I trust you enough to be in my community? If I trust you enough, if I don't, well, then you should be incarcerated. If I do, well, then he has the right to defend himself against violence too. And so, but of course, the jury don't care about that. You know, don't care about, as they say, if ifs and buts were candies and nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, yeah. If frogs had wings, they wouldn't bump their butts when they hopped.
They wouldn't bump their butts when they hopped. Yes, absolutely. And so, you know, I guess somewhat the world as it ought to be versus but we live in the world it is.
Yeah, isn't that the case for most things, right?
Yeah. And so will that guy face another, I don't know, could you see here, Tim, you've got vast experience with the system and the criminal system here. Could you see it, you know, the powers that be in this case getting together and going, all right, dude, no harm, no foul, you know, offsetting penalties.
I can see,
replay the down.
This is, after all, Texas, you know, the land of the bastard needed shooting. So
he needed killing defense.
I would be pretty surprised if the guy dodges the prohibited possessor charge. I'd be pretty surprised on that, because otherwise you're sort of giving carte blanche to people to violate that law, because it's been so well publicized, and it's, you know, I can't see a prosecutor giving a pass on that part. On the shooting part, I could see that happening.
Yeah, I think that no charges certainly there. I wonder, you know, this is one of those that again, this being Texas, that maybe, okay, so what we're gonna do here is we have how long to file this charge of prohibited possessor? And so you're gonna check in with your PO every week, and you're gonna do all kinds of nice things. Your PO's gonna come over to your house every week and search for guns, and there's not going to be any, right? And after 6 months, we'll decide.
They could offer him something like that for sure, almost like a diversion plea, sure. Yeah,
you know,
you bet.
And we'll see if it goes away. Now, if it gets loud,
right,
you're heading to the hooscow,
I mean,
buddy.
and I'm looking at it from the way it would be prosecuted in Phoenix. I mean, I think I may have told you this on the channel one other time, but I had a client that was living with a woman, and she was on. They were both on probation. But so at least they were well matched. But he had left a gun out, or I can't, now that I'm a little fuzzy, I can't recall if it was her gun or his gun, but at any rate, they had a gun that was like on the kitchen table, and the PO knocked on the door. And as you guys may or may not know, you lose your Fourth Amendment rights when you're on probation, so the parole officer cannot be turned away, right? So they came in there, there's a gun there. And my client did prison time for that. So they prosecute that pretty harshly here, right? Because it's easy to prosecute.
Sure.
And it's black and white. You're not supposed to have a gun. You know that. You were told that in writing. The judge told you that. We've got a copy of the video of your sentencing hearing. It's kind of a slam dunk case.
But you acknowledged it in writing.
Yeah, they hit it hard. So I don't have experience with Texas prosecutions. I've never tried a case in Texas, but yeah, Texas has that reputation for by God, let the Old West sort itself out sometimes. So there's that.
Yeah, and so I guess my problem here is I'm living in the world, you know, somewhat in my brain, the world that I'd rather live in rather than the world that is. So, you know, as we always say on the channel, okay, I'm never going to encourage somebody to do something illegal, certainly not in video where I can be discovered. I would never do that. That would be stupid.
That would be so stupid.
That would be the dumbest thing I've ever done. I don't, but I understand why some people might. You know, I understand what would lead somebody to do that.
A lot of people, they just speak their mind, and God bless them for doing that. But yeah, especially in today's age where everything you say is on camera almost all the time, it seems like, be careful what you say. And if you sound a little too bloodthirsty, Maybe that won't come up to bite you now, but does that resurface to yours now? If you get involved in your own nightmare and you know what the answer is, yeah, it will.
It will. It will. So, at any rate, I think it was an interesting case. I hope.
Well, it's a Coen Brothers movie, for God's sakes. I mean, right? The Patsy got killed. He was just out there making his $200. All he was
what
trying to do.
happened here? You know, just the explanation in the beginning of it. Okay, everybody,
I had
hang in
listened to
there.
it twice. Really? Is that what's going on?
Yeah,
So, yeah.
it's really what's going on. So, well, Tim, I appreciate the insight.
Always, buddy. Thanks for having me.